The dust kicked up around Helena Norwood's boots as she stood in the center of Calico's Main Street. Her rifle pointed steady at the man who thought he could take her ranch simply because she was a woman alone. It was June of 1878, and the California heat beat down mercilessly on the small mining town nestled in the Mojave Desert. Helena had arrived in Calico 3 months earlier after her father's death, inheriting a small cattle ranch on the outskirts of town. She was 22 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work. With auburn hair she kept tied back and green eyes that could cut through a man's bravado like a hot knife through butter. The man before her, a land speculator named Carlton Hayes, took a step back. He had not expected resistance, certainly not armed resistance from a woman who stood barely 5'7". His companions, 2 hired guns who looked more accustomed to intimidation than actual gunfighting, shifted nervously. "Miss Norwood, be reasonable," Carlton said, his voice dripping with condescension. "A woman alone cannot possibly manage a cattle operation. I am offering you a fair price." "You are offering me half what the land is worth," Helena replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "And I did not ask for your offer. I will not ask you again to leave my property." Before Carlton could respond, a voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. The lady made herself clear. Helena's eyes flicked to the side where a man on horseback had appeared. He sat easy in the saddle, a tall figure with broad shoulders and a weathered face that suggested he was somewhere in his mid-20s. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and his blue eyes held a hardness that came from experience rather than cruelty. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a vest that had seen better days. A revolver sat on his hip, and his hand rested casually near it. "This is not your concern, stranger," Carlton said, his voice tight. "Vincent Olsen," the cowboy said, guiding his horse forward a few steps. "And it became my concern when I saw 3 men harassing a woman on her own land. Seems like poor manners to me." Helena felt a flash of irritation despite the fact that this Vincent Olsen seemed to be on her side. "I can handle this myself," she said, her grip on the rifle never wavering. Vincent turned his gaze to her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or amusement. "I do not doubt it, miss, but sometimes having an extra witness to intimidation helps when the law gets involved." Carlton's face reddened. He looked between Helena and Vincent, calculating his odds. Finally, he gestured to his men. "This is not over, Miss Norwood. You will find that running a ranch alone is harder than you think. When you are ready to sell, my offer will be considerably lower." "Then I suppose you will be waiting a very long time," Helena said. Carlton and his men mounted their horses and rode off, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Helena finally lowered her rifle, releasing a breath she had not realized she was holding. She turned to face Vincent properly, her chin lifted in a gesture that was part defiance and part pride. "I appreciate the assistance, but I had the situation under control," she said. Vincent dismounted, moving with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He was taller than she had realized, probably 6 feet or so, and up close she could see the laugh lines around his eyes and the scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Yes, madam, I could see that," he said, his tone neutral. "I am looking for work. Heard in town that you might be hiring." Helena's eyes narrowed. "Heard from whom? I have not advertised for ranch hands. The general store owner mentioned you had lost your last hand to the silver mines, said you were trying to run the place alone." Vincent gestured toward the small ranch visible in the distance, where a modest house stood surrounded by corrals and a barn that looked like it needed repairs. "No offense meant, But that is too much work for one person, man or woman. I am managing just fine, Helena said, even though they both knew it was only partially true. She had been managing, but barely. Between maintaining the property, caring for the cattle, and dealing with men like Carlton Hayes who saw her as an easy target, she was stretched thinner than a worn rope. I can see that, Vincent said again, and this time there was definitely amusement in his voice. But you could be doing better than fine. I am a good hand with cattle, I can mend fences, and I am decent enough with repairs. I am not looking for charity, just honest work for honest pay. Helena studied him, trying to gauge his intentions. She had learned the hard way that not all men who offered help did so without expecting something in return. But there was something straightforward in Vincent's manner, something that suggested he was exactly what he claimed to be, a cowboy looking for work. I cannot pay much, she said finally. $30 a month, plus meals and a bunk in the barn. That will do, Vincent said, extending his hand. Helena hesitated for just a moment before shaking it. His grip was firm but not crushing, his palm calloused from work. You should know, she said, meeting his eyes directly. I run this ranch. I make the decisions. If you have a problem taking direction from a woman, you should ride on now. Vincent's mouth quirked into what might have been the beginning of a smile. Miss Norwood, I have no problem taking direction from anyone who knows what they are doing. Man or woman makes no difference to me. Good, Helena said. She turned toward the ranch house, then paused and looked back at him. And another thing, I grew up on a ranch in Texas. My father taught me everything he knew about cattle and horses and running a spread. I am not some city woman playing at ranching. I am stubborn and proud, and I will not be coddled or protected like some delicate flower. Vincent did begin to smile then, a genuine expression that softened the hard edges of his face. I would not dream of it, madam. I just watched you face down 3 men with nothing but nerve and a rifle. I reckon you can handle whatever comes your way. Despite herself, Helena felt a small spark of something warm in her chest. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her with that kind of respect. She quickly pushed the feeling aside. Vincent Olsen was an employee, nothing more. The barn is over there, she said, pointing. Get yourself settled. We start at dawn. That first day set the tone for the weeks that followed. Helena woke before sunrise, as she always did, and found Vincent already in the barn, tending to the horses. She had been prepared to rouse him from sleep, to prove that she was the harder worker, but he had beaten her to it. Good morning, he said when she appeared in the doorway. Coffee is on the stove in the house. I started a fire. Helena blinked, caught off guard. You went into my house. Left the coffee pot on the porch, Vincent corrected. Did not figure it would be proper to go inside. She felt a small flush of embarrassment at her assumption. Thank you, she said stiffly, not accustomed to accepting help. They worked side by side that day, riding out to check the herd and mending a section of fence that had come down in a recent windstorm. Vincent was true to his word. He was skilled with cattle, moving them with an ease that came from years of experience. He was also a hard worker, never complaining about the heat or the difficulty of the tasks. But what surprised Helena most was that he never tried to take over. When they discussed how to approach a problem, he offered his opinion but deferred to her final decision. When she chose a method he might have done differently, he followed her lead without argument, and when her way worked, he nodded in approval. When it did not, he helped her fix the problem without a single word of "I told you so." It was disconcerting. Helena had been prepared for resistance, for the inevitable moment when Vincent would decide he knew better and try to push her aside. She had dealt with that attitude her entire life, from ranch hands who worked for her father to the men in town who could not conceive of a woman running a business alone. But Vincent seemed genuinely content to work under her direction. A week passed, then two. The ranch began to show signs of improvement. Repairs that Helena had been putting off, lacking either the time or the extra pair of hands needed, were completed. The cattle looked healthier with 2 people to watch over them. Even the house, which Helena had barely had time to maintain, began to look more cared for as small fixes were made in spare moments. They fell into a rhythm, a partnership of sorts, though Helena was careful to maintain a professional distance. They ate meals together, sitting on the porch in the evening after the day's work was done, but their conversation stayed safely on topics like the weather, the cattle, and the state of the ranch. Still, Helena found herself noticing things about Vincent that had nothing to do with his work. The way he gentled a skittish horse with patient hands and a soft voice. The way he sometimes hummed old trail songs while he worked. The way his face looked in the golden light of sunset, all hard plains and surprising gentleness. She told herself these observations meant nothing. She had no time or inclination for romance. The ranch was her priority, her future. She would not risk it by getting entangled with a hired hand, no matter how capable or unexpectedly considerate he might be. It was on a Tuesday in late July when things began to shift. Helena and Vincent had ridden into Calico to pick up supplies, an expedition that required most of the morning. The town was busy, miners and prospectors mixing with the more permanent residents. Helena was well known by now, and she received a mixture of respectful nods and disapproving looks as she walked down the main street. They were loading sacks of grain onto the wagon when Carlton Hayes appeared, flanked by his 2 hired guns. Helena felt her spine stiffen immediately. "Miss Norwood," Carlton said, tipping his hat in a gesture that was more mockery than courtesy. "I see you still have your pet Cowboy following you around." Vincent straightened slowly, his hand moving casually to rest on his belt near his revolver. "Hayes," he said, his voice flat. "Still think you can manage that ranch?" Carlton continued, addressing Helena. "Or are you ready to admit that you are in over your head?" Helena felt anger flare hot in her chest. Before she could respond, Vincent spoke. "The lady's ranch is thriving," he said. "More than can be said for your speculating business, from what I hear. Word is you have been trying to buy up half the valley and not having much success." Carlton's face darkened. "My business affairs are not your concern, Drifter. And Miss Norwood's ranch is not yours," Vincent replied. Helena stepped forward, inserting herself into the confrontation. "I told you once, Mr. Hayes, and I will not repeat myself again. My ranch is not for sale. Not now, not ever. If you continue to harass me, I will speak to the sheriff." "Sheriff Dockery," Carlton laughed. "He is a reasonable man. He understands that some things are just not proper. A woman alone, running a ranch, it goes against the natural order." "The natural order," Helena repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. "You mean the order where men like you get to decide what women can and cannot do?" "I am stubborn and proud, Mr. Hayes, and I will not be intimidated by you or anyone else." She turned on her heel and climbed onto the wagon seat. Vincent followed, taking up the reins. As they pulled away, Carlton called after them. "You will regret this, Miss Norwood, both of you." The ride back to the ranch was tense. Helena stared straight ahead, her jaw tight with anger. Vincent drove in silence, giving her space to cool down. It was not until they were halfway home that she finally spoke. "He is not going to give up," she said. "No," Vincent agreed. "Men like that never do. And I will not be driven off my own land. I know." Helena turned to look at him. "Why are you still here, Vincent? This trouble with Carlton, it is only going to get worse. You could find easier work elsewhere." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I could," he said, "but I do not want to." "Why not?" He glanced at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Because I admire what you are doing. Because I think you deserve to succeed. And because I would like to see you prove all those narrow-minded fools wrong." Helena felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something dangerous and exhilarating. She looked away quickly. "I am not asking you to fight my battles." "I know," Vincent said again. "But there is nothing wrong with standing beside someone in a fight. It does not make you any less capable or independent." She wanted to argue, but the words would not come. Deep down, she knew he was right. She had been so determined to prove she could do everything alone that she had forgotten there was strength in partnership, in standing with someone rather than always standing alone. "Thank you," she said quietly. "No need for thanks," Vincent replied. "You would do the same for me." And he was right. She would. The rest of the summer passed in a blur of work and growing tension. Carlton Hayes did not make another direct approach, but his presence was felt in other ways. Several of Helena's cattle went missing, almost certainly rustled. Someone cut the fence line on the north pasture, forcing her and Vincent to spend 2 days rounding up scattered animals and making repairs. Small acts of sabotage that could not quite be traced back to Carlton, but bore all the hallmarks of his interference. Through it all, Helena and Vincent worked together. They rode out before dawn and returned after dark, pushing themselves to the limit to keep the ranch running despite the harassment. And somewhere in those long days and exhausted evenings, something shifted between them. It started small. A hand offered to help Helena dismount when she was too tired to move easily. A concerned look when she pushed herself too hard. The way Vincent always made sure she ate enough at meals, quietly putting extra food on her plate when he thought she was not paying attention. Helena noticed these things, and she noticed her own responses. The way her heart beat a little faster when Vincent smiled at her. The warmth that spread through her chest when he praised her handling of a difficult situation. The dreams she had started having, dreams where his hands touched more than just her shoulder or arm. She tried to ignore these feelings, to push them down and focus on the work. But it became increasingly difficult, especially when she caught Vincent looking at her with an expression that suggested his thoughts might be traveling similar paths. It all came to a head on an August evening after a particularly grueling day. They had spent hours tracking down more missing cattle, finding 3 head dead in a ravine, clearly driven there deliberately. Helena was exhausted and furious, her emotions running too high to contain. "This has to stop," she said as they rode back toward the ranch in the fading light. "I need to confront Carlton directly, make it clear that I know what he is doing." "That might not be wise," Vincent said carefully. "If you accuse him without proof, he can make things worse. So I should just let him destroy my ranch piece by piece." Helena's voice rose. "Let him win through attrition." "That is not what I am saying." "Then what are you saying?" She pulled her horse to a stop, turning to face him. "That I should give up, sell and leave." Vincent stopped as well, his expression troubled. "I am saying we need to be smart about this. Going off half-cocked will only play into his hands." "We," Helena repeated, latching onto the word. "This is my ranch, Vincent, my problem. You are an employee, not a partner." She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth. They were unfair and untrue, and she knew it. But she was too angry and too frightened to take them back. Vincent's face went carefully neutral. "Yes, madam," he said, his voice formal in a way it had not been in weeks. "I apologize for overstepping." He urged his horse forward, leaving Helena sitting alone in the gathering darkness. She closed her eyes, feeling the sting of tears she refused to shed. Why had she said that? Why had she pushed him away when he was only trying to help? Because you are scared, a voice in her head whispered. Scared of losing the ranch, scared of failing, scared of what you are starting to feel for him. By the time Helena reached the ranch house, Vincent had already tended to both horses and disappeared into the barn. She stood on the porch for a long moment, debating whether to go after him and apologize. Pride held her back. She was not wrong to maintain boundaries, she told herself. It was better this way. But when she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she could not escape the hollow feeling in her chest. The next morning, Vincent was polite but distant. He spoke only when necessary, asking for directions and reporting on tasks completed. He no longer anticipated her needs or offered suggestions. He was exactly what Helena had claimed he was, an employee, nothing more. It was what she had said she wanted. So why did it feel so wrong? 3 days passed in this uncomfortable new dynamic. Helena threw herself into work, driving herself even harder than usual. Vincent kept pace but no longer tried to stop her when she pushed too far. He no longer looked at her with warmth in his eyes. On the 4th day, Sheriff Dockery rode out to the ranch. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen too much of human nature to be surprised by much. "Miss Norwood," he said, touching his hat, "I need to have a word with you." Helena's stomach tightened. "What is this about, Sheriff?" "There have been complaints," Dockery said, not meeting her eyes, "about your operation here. Questions about whether the cattle you have been selling are all rightfully yours." "What?" Helena felt the blood drain from her face. "That is absurd. Every head of cattle on this ranch is accounted for." "I am sure that is true," the sheriff said, though his tone suggested he was not sure at all. "But I need to see your brand records, your bills of sale, just to clear things up." "This is Carlton Hayes' doing," Vincent said, stepping forward. He had been working near the barn but had approached when he saw the sheriff arrive. "He has been harassing Miss Norwood for months, trying to force her to sell." "That is a serious accusation, Mr. Olsen," Dockery said. "Do you have proof?" "Do you have proof that Miss Norwood has done anything wrong?" Vincent countered. The sheriff sighed. "Look, I am just doing my job. Let me see the records, and if everything is in order, that will be the end of it." Helena's mind raced. She knew her records were impeccable because her father had taught her the importance of careful documentation. But the fact that the sheriff was here at all, that Carlton had managed to plant enough doubt to warrant an investigation, filled her with cold dread. This was exactly the kind of thing that could ruin her reputation in the community, making it impossible to do business even if she was cleared of any wrongdoing. "Of course," she said, keeping her voice steady. "The records are in the house. I will get them." It took 2 hours for the sheriff to review every piece of paper Helena produced. Vincent stood beside her the entire time, his presence silent but supportive. Helena was grateful for it, even though things were still strained between them. Finally, Dockery pushed back from the table and nodded. "Everything appears to be in order," he said. "I apologize for the intrusion, Miss Norwood." "Can I ask who made the complaint?" Helena said, though she already knew the answer. "It was made anonymously," the sheriff said, which was as good as confirmation. "But between you and me, I suspect you are right about Hayes. The man has been making himself a nuisance to more than just you. Unfortunately, unless you can prove he is behind the trouble you have been having, there is not much I can do." After the sheriff left, Helena sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. Vincent moved around the kitchen, putting papers away and then starting a pot of coffee. "I am sorry," Helena said quietly. Vincent paused in his work. "For what?" "For what I said the other day. About you being just an employee. It was not true and it was not fair. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from her. "Why did you say it?" Helena wrapped her hands around the warm cup, staring into the dark liquid. "Because I am scared," she admitted. "Of losing the ranch, of failing, of other things." "What other things?" She looked up and met his eyes. "Of what I am starting to feel for you." The words hung in the air between them. Vincent's expression softened, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "Helena," he said, using her first name for the first time. "I have been falling for you since the day I met you, since I saw you standing in the street with a rifle, facing down 3 men and not backing down an inch. I love your strength and your stubbornness and your pride. I love the way you fight for what is yours, and I would like to fight beside you if you will let me." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not want to need anyone," she whispered. "I have spent my whole life proving I could stand on my own." "Needing someone does not make you weak," Vincent said gently. "It makes you human, and for what it is worth, I need you too. I need your courage and your determination. I need the way you make me want to be better, to work harder. We are stronger together than apart." "I know," Helena said, and realized it was true. She did know, had known for weeks. She had just been too stubborn and too proud to admit it. "I love you too, Vincent. I have been trying not to, but I do." Vincent stood and came around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Helena went willingly, resting her head against his chest and feeling the steady beat of his heart. His arms wrapped around her, strong and secure, and for the first time in months she felt safe. "We are going to get through this," Vincent said softly, "together. We will deal with Carlton Hayes and we will make this ranch thrive, but you need to let me help you, really help you as a partner." Helena pulled back slightly to look up at him. "A partner," she repeated. "Is that what you want to be?" "I want to be whatever you will let me be," Vincent said. "A partner, a husband eventually if you will have me, whatever it takes to stand beside you." "Husband," Helena breathed. The word should have terrified her, should have made her pull away. Instead, it felt right. "Yes, someday. When this is all settled and the ranch is secure, I want that." Vincent's face lit up with a smile that transformed him from handsome to devastating. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Helena kissed him back, pouring weeks of longing and fear and hope into the contact. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "We will make this work," he said. "I promise you." "I know we will," Helena replied, and for the first time she truly believed it. But knowing they loved each other and wanting to build a future together did not solve the problem of Carlton Hayes. If anything, it made the threat he posed more acute. The ranch was not just Helena's dream now. It was their dream, their future. They spent the next week planning. Vincent reached out to contacts he had made during his years as a cowboy, other ranch hands and drifters who might have seen or heard something about Carlton's activities. Helena spoke to sympathetic townsfolk, building a network of support and information. What they learned was not encouraging. Carlton Hayes had his fingers in multiple schemes, from legitimate property speculation to less savory activities like intimidation and possibly worse. He had money and influence, 2 things Helena and Vincent lacked. But they had something Carlton did not: determination and the willingness to outwork and outsmart their opponent. It was Vincent who came up with the plan. "We need to catch him in the act," he said one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. "If we can prove he is behind the rustling and sabotage, the sheriff will have to act." "How do we do that?" Helena asked. "We set a trap," Vincent said. "We spread word that you are going to be moving cattle to market in 2 weeks, taking the whole herd through the North Pass. Make it seem like the ranch will be nearly empty. If Carlton is going to make a move, that would be the time. But we will actually be here, watching, Helena said, understanding dawning. Exactly. We will move the cattle, but we will have friends watching them. You and I will stay here with a couple of trusted men. When Carlton or his hired guns show up, we will catch them red-handed. It was risky. If something went wrong, Helena could lose everything. But doing nothing was not an option either. Carlton would keep chipping away at the ranch until there was nothing left. All right, Helena said. Let us do it. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Vincent reached out to a couple of fellow cowboys he trusted, men who were willing to help for modest pay and the promise of a good meal. Helena made a show of preparing for the cattle drive, letting word slip in town that she would be away from the ranch for several days. The night before the supposed drive, Helena and Vincent moved the cattle with the help of their hired friends. But instead of heading to market, the herd was driven to a secure canyon on the far edge of Helena's property, where 2 men would watch over them. Helena and Vincent returned to the ranch house and waited. Vincent had also asked a 3rd man, a grizzled old cowboy named Silas who had worked with Vincent years before, to stay with them. Silas had a reputation for being tough in a fight and trustworthy in a pinch. You really think Hayes will take the bait? Silas asked as they settled in to wait, keeping the house dark to maintain the illusion that no one was home. He has been trying to drive Miss Norwood off this land for months, Vincent said. If he thinks he has a chance to do real damage while she is away, he will take it. Helena checked her rifle for the 3rd time, anxiety making her restless. Vincent moved to stand beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. It will be all right, he said quietly. Trust the plan. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his confidence. I do trust it. I trust you. They did not have to wait long. Around midnight, the sound of horses approaching brought all 3 of them to full alert. Through the window, Helena could make out 4 figures on horseback moving quietly toward the barn. That is Carlton's men, Vincent whispered. I recognize 2 of them from town. What do we do? Helena asked. We wait for them to make their move. We need them to actually do something we can prove. It was agonizing to watch as the men dismounted and began moving around the property. One headed toward the barn with what looked like a can of kerosene. Helena's heart clenched. They were going to burn it down. Now, Vincent said. The 3 of them moved out of the house swiftly and silently. Vincent and Silas went around one side while Helena took the other, positioning themselves to cut off any escape routes. Stop right there. Vincent's voice rang out in the darkness. The 4 men spun around, caught in the act. The one with the kerosene can dropped it, the liquid splashing across the ground. For a moment, everyone froze. Then one of Carlton's men went for his gun. Vincent was faster, his revolver clearing leather and firing in one smooth motion. The shot went wide, a warning rather than an attempt to kill, but it had the desired effect. The man froze, his gun only halfway drawn. I would not do that if I were you, Silas said, emerging from the shadows with his own weapon trained on the group. You are outnumbered and caught dead to rights. Helena stepped forward, her rifle steady. Where is Carlton Hayes? Did he not have the courage to do his dirty work himself? One of the men, a weaselly-looking individual Helena recognized from town, swallowed hard. He is waiting up the road. We were supposed to signal when it was done. Silas, tie these men up, Vincent said. Helena and I are going to have a conversation with Mr. Hayes. They found Carlton exactly where his man had indicated, sitting on his horse at the edge of Helena's property. When he saw Helena and Vincent approaching, his face went pale in the moonlight. Miss Norwood, he said, trying to maintain his composure. What a surprise to find you here. I thought you were taking your cattle to market. You thought wrong, Helena said coldly. And your men are currently tied up in my barn, waiting for the sheriff to arrive. I sent Silas to fetch him as soon as we caught them trying to burn down my property. Carlton's facade cracked. You cannot prove I had anything to do with this. Your men will talk, Vincent said. Men like that always do when they are facing jail time. And we heard one of them clearly say you sent them. It is your word against mine. No, Helena said. It is my word, Vincent's word, Silas's word, and your men's word against yours. You have lost, Carlton. It is over. For a moment, Carlton looked like he might try to run. But then his shoulders slumped in defeat. He was a bully and a schemer, but he was not brave enough to make a stand when his plans fell apart. Sheriff Dockery arrived within the hour, roused from bed by Silas and understandably grumpy until he understood the situation. Once he saw Carlton's men and heard their confession, extracted with surprising ease once they realized their employer was not going to protect them, his demeanor changed. Mr. Hayes, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson and for rustling, Dockery said, his voice grim. And I expect we will find evidence of other crimes once we start looking properly. As Carlton was led away in handcuffs, Helena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was over. Finally, truly over. Vincent put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. You did it, he said softly. You saved the ranch. We did it, Helena corrected. She looked up at him, seeing her own relief and joy reflected in his face. Together. The trial took place in early September. Carlton Hayes was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison. His assets, which included several properties acquired through questionable means, were seized and sold off. The shadow that had hung over Helena's ranch was finally lifted. But the victory, sweet as it was not the most important thing that happened that September. On a clear, cool morning 2 weeks after the trial, Helena Norwood married Vincent Olsen in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with half the town in attendance. Helena wore a dress of cream-colored silk, simple but elegant, that she had ordered from San Francisco. Vincent wore a new suit, looking uncomfortably formal but devastatingly handsome. They stood together under an arch Vincent had built from wood and decorated with wildflowers, and they spoke vows that were heartfelt and true. I promise to stand beside you, Vincent said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. To work with you and for our future, to respect your strength and support you in weakness, to love you every day for the rest of my life. Helena's voice was steady as she replied. I promise to let you in, to share my burdens and my joys, to build a life with you as partners in all things, to love you with all my stubborn, proud heart, today and always. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers. Helena laughed against Vincent's mouth, feeling happier than she had ever thought possible. The reception was held in the barn, which had been cleaned and decorated for the occasion. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and laughter that echoed into the evening. Helena danced with her new husband, her head resting on his shoulder, and thought about how much her life had changed in just a few short months. She had started the summer alone, frightened but determined to prove she could manage on her own. She was ending it with a partner, someone who matched her spirit and had won her respect through patience, hard work, and unwavering support. What are you thinking? Vincent asked as they swayed to the music. That I was wrong, Helena said. I thought I needed to do everything alone to prove I was strong, but I am stronger with you. We are stronger together, Vincent agreed. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes soft with love. Always. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranching in the California desert was never easy, and there were droughts and hard winters, cattle lost to disease or accident, and all the other difficulties that came with making a living from the land. But Helena and Vincent faced every challenge side by side, equal partners in every sense of the word. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Vincent's experience and Helena's sharp business sense proved to be an excellent combination. They expanded slowly and carefully, adding to their herd and improving their property. Within 5 years, the Olsen Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the Calico area. In the spring of 1881, Helena gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Samuel after Vincent's father. Vincent was beside himself with joy, cradling his son with a tenderness that made Helena fall in love with him all over again. She watched her husband with their baby and thought about how far they had come. The stubborn, proud woman who had been so determined to prove she needed no one had learned that love and partnership did not weaken her. They made her whole. Samuel was a healthy, happy baby who grew into a rambunctious toddler. He was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Grace, who had her mother's red hair and her father's blue eyes. And then, in 1886, another son, Thomas, who was quieter than his siblings but just as beloved. Helena had never imagined herself as a mother, too focused on the ranch and her independence to think much about children. But she discovered that motherhood, like marriage, did not diminish her. She was still herself, still strong and stubborn and proud. She just had more people to love, more reasons to fight for the future. Vincent proved to be a wonderful father. He was patient and playful, teaching the children to ride almost as soon as they could walk. He told them stories by the fire on winter nights and showed them how to read the land and the sky. And he always treated their mother with respect and love, showing his sons and daughter by example what a true partnership looked like. The children grew up understanding that their mother was as much the head of the ranch as their father. They saw Helena make decisions about the business, saw the hands come to her for direction, saw the respect with which she was treated in town. And they grew up believing that women were just as capable as men, a lesson Helena hoped would shape them into good people. On a warm evening in June of 1890, 12 years after Helena and Vincent first met, they sat together on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now 9, was teaching 6-year-old Grace how to throw a lasso while 4-year-old Thomas watched with wide eyes. "You remember the first day we met?" Helena asked, her hand in Vincent's. "Every detail," Vincent said. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You were standing in the middle of the street with a rifle, facing down Carlton Hayes like an avenging angel. I fell in love with you right then, though I did not admit it to myself for weeks." Helena laughed. "I thought you were just another drifter looking for work. I never imagined you would become everything to me." "Life is strange that way," Vincent said. "You set out on one path and end up somewhere completely different, somewhere better." "Do you ever regret it?" Helena asked. "Staying here, settling down, you were a cowboy. You could have kept drifting, seeing new places." Vincent shook his head. "Never. Not for a single moment. This ranch, this life, you and the children, this is everything I ever wanted. I just did not know it until I found you." Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar warmth of his presence. "I am glad you stopped that day. Glad you offered to help. Glad you were patient with me while I figured out that I did not have to choose between being strong and being loved." "You taught me something too," Vincent said. "You taught me that true strength is not about doing everything alone. It is about knowing when to stand firm and when to lean on someone else. You are the strongest person I know, Helena, and you have never been stronger than when you are allowing yourself to be loved." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. The ranch stretched out around them, green pastures and sturdy fences, a barn filled with horses and equipment, corrals holding healthy cattle. It was a testament to hard work and determination, to partnership and love. Samuel's laughter rang out as he finally managed to lasso the fence post he had been aiming for. Grace cheered, and Thomas clapped his small hands in delight. Vincent and Helena smiled, sharing a look that held 12 years of history and the promise of many more to come. "We did well," Helena said softly. "We did," Vincent agreed. "And we are not done yet." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and sorrows, triumphs and setbacks. But through it all, Helena and Vincent remained solid, a team that nothing could shake. They grew older together, their hair turning gray and lines deepening around their eyes. But the love between them never faded. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year. Samuel grew up to be a fine rancher himself, eventually taking over the day-to-day running of the property as his parents aged. He married a schoolteacher from San Bernardino, a smart woman named Margaret who fit seamlessly into the family. They gave Helena and Vincent grandchildren, continuing the legacy. Grace, spirited and independent like her mother, became a veterinarian, one of the first women in California to do so. She opened a practice in Calico and the surrounding area, caring for the animals that were so vital to the community. She never married, claiming she was too busy and too content with her life to bother, and Helena understood perfectly. Thomas, the quietest of the three, surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer. He moved to San Francisco but visited often, and he used his skills to help ranchers and small business owners who might otherwise have been taken advantage of by more powerful interests. He married late, to a widow with 2 children of her own, and proved to be a devoted husband and father. Helena watched her children build their lives with pride. She and Vincent had given them roots and wings, a solid foundation and the freedom to fly. They had taught them to be strong and kind, to work hard and love deeply. It was, Helena thought, their greatest accomplishment. In the spring of 1905, as Helena was approaching her 49th birthday, she and Vincent took a rare day away from the ranch. They rode out to a spot they had discovered years before, a small meadow surrounded by rocky outcroppings with a view that stretched for miles. They sat together on a blanket, eating the lunch Helena had packed, and talked about their life. Samuel was running the ranch beautifully, with his oldest son, now 14, learning at his side. Grace was thriving in her practice, respected and admired throughout the region. Thomas had just successfully argued a case before the California Supreme Court, a triumph he had written to tell them about. "We have been blessed," Vincent said, lying back on the blanket and pulling Helena down beside him. "More than I ever thought possible." Helena nestled against his side, her head on his chest. "Do you remember how stubborn I was when we met, how I insisted I did not need anyone?" "I remember thinking you were magnificent," Vincent said, "and terrifying, and absolutely fascinating." Helena laughed. "I was so determined to prove I could do everything alone. I thought needing someone was weakness. And now I know that loving you, leaning on you, building this life with you, has been the greatest strength of my life. You matched my spirit, Vincent. You never tried to break it or bend it. You just stood beside me and made me better." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "You did the same for me. Before I met you, I was just drifting. You gave me purpose, a home, a family. You gave me everything." They lay there for a long time, watching clouds drift across the blue sky, feeling the warmth of the sun and each other. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. The ranch, the family, the love they shared, it would all endure. As the afternoon began to wane, they packed up and rode slowly back to the ranch. When they crested the hill and saw their home spread out below them, smoke rising from the chimney and figures moving about the yard, Helena felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what she had fought for all those years ago when she stood in the street facing Carlton Hayes. Not just the land or the ranch itself, but the right to build a life on her own terms, to be strong and stubborn and proud, and to be loved not despite those qualities but because of them. Vincent had seen her clearly from the beginning. He had seen her strength and respected it. He had seen her independence and supported it. He had seen her heart, guarded and fierce, and had loved it patiently until she was ready to love him back. They rode into the yard together, side by side as they had been for nearly 30 years. Samuel came out to greet them, taking the horse's reins with a smile. Margaret appeared on the porch with glasses of cool lemonade. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the laughter of grandchildren at play. Helena and Vincent sat on the porch, the same porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. They held hands, fingers intertwined, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I love you," Helena said, words she had spoken thousands of times but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Vincent replied, his voice as steady and true as it had been the day they married. "Today and always." The sun slipped below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Helena and Vincent sat together, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love they had nurtured for 3 decades. They had started as 2 stubborn, proud individuals, each convinced they could face the world alone. They had ended up as partners, as soulmates, as 2 halves of a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. And as the night deepened and the stars filled the sky, they sat together in perfect contentment, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. Just as they always had, just as they always would, for as long as they both should live. The Olsen ranch continued to thrive for generations, a legacy of hard work, determination, and love. But it all began with a stubborn, proud woman who refused to be pushed off her land, and a cowboy who matched her spirit, won her respect, and captured her heart. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West itself, fierce and true and enduring. And it all started on a dusty street in Calico, California, on a hot June day in 1878, when Vincent Olsen saw Helena Norwood facing down 3 men with nothing but courage and a rifle, and decided he had found something worth staying for. Their story became legend in Calico, passed down through the years as an example of what was possible when 2 strong people chose to stand together. The ranch they built still stands today, run by their descendants, a testament to the power of partnership and the strength that comes from loving someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. Helena and Vincent Olsen lived long, full lives, surrounded by family and the land they loved. They died within months of each other in the winter of 1916, both in their 80s, their hands clasped together until the very end. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky as wide and beautiful as the love they shared. And though they are gone, their legacy lives on. In the land they nurtured, the family they raised, the example they set. They proved that strength and love are not opposites, that pride and partnership can coexist, that 2 stubborn spirits can come together and create something beautiful and lasting. Their story is one of the Wild West, of a time when the land was hard and life was harder, when survival took grit and determination and courage. But more than that, it is a story of love, of 2 people who found each other against the odds and built a life that was richer and fuller than anything either could have achieved alone. Helena was stubborn and proud, and she never lost those qualities. Vincent matched her spirit and won her respect, and then her love. Together, they built an empire of the heart, one that would endure long after they were gone. And in the end, that is the greatest legacy anyone can leave. A love that endures, a partnership that inspires, a life lived fully and without regret. Helena and Vincent Olsen had all of that and more. They had each other, and that made all the difference.